very much, Bruce, and welcome to this session on how data creates a whole new ballgame. Our access to data and digital technology is already changing the way that we purchase, supply electricity, and the way we interact with the power system. And digital technology is a key enabler in the way we will reach deep decarbonization of the entire energy sector. As the low-carbon energy sector will be much larger and much more complex than it is today, we need digital technology to ensure its safe and reliable operation. And digital technology can also ensure that we enhance the existing power infrastructure so that we can electrify end use much faster and therefore, for example, accelerate the rollout of electric vehicles. So if we're to meet the challenge of rapid decarbonization and meet Europe's climate goals, data will become the lifeblood of utilities, and data will ensure that our power networks are more interconnected, more reliable, more efficient, and more sustainable. The speed of that progress will be determined to a significant measure by policy and framework. And so with this afternoon, we will also be looking at the EU Action Plan on the digitalization of the energy sector, and I know that has already been mentioned today. For all stakeholders in this sector, there are also some complex questions about interoperability between components and systems, building and maintaining consumer trust, how we address the challenge of cybersecurity, ensuring equal access to technology, and with the proliferation of ICT, how we ensure that information and communications technology itself is sustainable. So I'm privileged to be participating in the platform in the session this afternoon. And to kick us off, I'm very pleased to invite Gary Lawrence, Segment President for Power and Grid for Schneider Electric. Welcome, Gary.
Okay, great. So firstly, thank you, Lucy. Thanks for the introduction. And as Lucy said, my name is Gary Lawrence. I'm the Segment President of Power and Grid in Schneider Electric. And it's a real pleasure to be here in person today and see everyone has a body and not just a head on a video screen. All right, let's talk about the session here. We're talking about digital disruption, how data creates a whole new ballgame, value-driven data management, the key to speeding up decarbonisation. I guess no one doubts the need for climate change, and climate change is essentially an energy issue. And you know why, you may ask? Because over 80% of global CO2 emissions are due to production and consumption of energy. And of that, in 2019, some 45% of global emissions come from the power generation side, and 55% come from the generation side. So it's a real issue for us. So I want everyone to remember that 80% of global CO2 emissions are coming from energy consumption and production. I really want to emphasise the word speed here, okay? And speed is really the word I want you to take away here. Current pledges don't get us to the finish line fast enough, and there's really not a moment to waste. We can still limit global heating to the 1.5 degrees Celsius, but only if we remove some 10 gigatons of CO2 emission every year per year until 2030. Now, 10 gigatons, I don't know, it's very hard to visualise what 10 gigatons is, but just in basic terms, it's 3 times the annual emission of the entire Europe. So it's a huge amount of CO2 we need to remove from the environment to drive this ceiling to keep below the 1.5 degrees Celsius here. A busy slide, but I want to give you a couple of messages here. Firstly, you know, we see both private and public sectors are now moving towards net zero policies. And really, DSOs are at the centre of this. You know, DSOs are the conductors of this symphony. We have DR penetration, we have the rise of the prosumers, we have many things that are being electrified. Okay, and when we look at DSOs, we think about what's happening in that environment there. We see more renewables coming into the marketplace. Wind, solar, other activities, thermal, etc. We see, you know, in the US, for example, up to 90% of coal-fired power plants have a higher operation cost, a higher running cost than that of wind and solar in the new technologies today. We see the implementation of what's happening in EV vehicles, okay, and the massive electrification that's happening here. Globally, we see many countries around the world committing to net zero targets by 2050. So a huge amount of electrification is happening into the marketplace. And then we see what I would call the rise of the prosumer, okay? We see that up to 20% of the first 2,000 global companies are committed to net zero policies. Okay, so there's a lot happening across the whole life cycle, across the eco-structure here, from the prosumer, the opaqueness that's happening between what I would call behind the meter and in front of the meter there, the bi-directional, the renewables, and obviously the massive electrification that we need to do to increase, to get to this net zero policy. We talked that, you know, digital is in the topic here, of course, and digitisation is really a key in speeding up, and I mentioned speed before, is really key in speeding up what we need to do here. And that means data and data management. We're talking about sensors, data, analytics, information, allowing, you know, empowered decision making, allowing faster decision making and automation there. You know, up to 50% of businesses can cut their CO2 emission just by deploying digital solutions and automation systems moving forward. The world also needs to completely decouple what I would call emissions from economic growth, and digitisation transformation is one key to doing that there. Digital technology also vastly improves monitoring and reporting and sustainability across the full value chain. You know, in a recent survey, we've seen that the progress has already been made in this case here, and that up to 79% of energy and sustainable professionals are already collecting data for this particular purpose on sustainability and moving forward to this carbon neutral emissions. What I would say here is, quite frankly, it's a stepwise foundational approach. You know, a complete approach to data management. It's a business strategy as well. You know, many people go straight to the topic and think about advanced analytics, okay? And I would say, you know, analytics are very important, but it's like I would say like the cherry on the cake. There's many steps and functions you need to do before that, before you get to the analytics there. And we're talking about standards, we're talking about digital governance, we're talking about digital twin, and then of course the analytics there. So it's really a foundational stepwise approach that we need to take to data management, and it needs to be aligned with business strategy. I guess in talking about this foundational stepwise approach, you know, managing data, we know is not an option, okay? And before you get to the analytics, you need to take these steps. And we've outlined in Schneider 4 major factors that we need to consider before we get to those steps there. One, of course, is the data preparation, okay, for the successful enablement of advanced analytics. And obviously data scientists and others need to maybe not operationally efficient, so need to be aware of that data there. So data preparation is firstly key and stepwise in this approach. Of course, contextualization of its self-service data, asset-based analytics, these are also very important moving forward. Lucy mentioned interoperability, and I think that's very key in the you know, applications between actors, applications between communities. Another stepwise approach that we need to take there. And of course, lastly, the right analytics, the journey from what I would say KPIs to AI. The right technologies, the right support, the right analytics there. This is always needed, and then obviously at the right time as well when we talk about the analytics there, having that information available at that right time there. So it's very important when we look at these 4 steps. when we talked about the steps here, we talked about the foundational approach. Conceptually, this is what we looked at here. Schneider Electric recently with Capgemini come up with an approach there, a stepwise approach to look at what the framework would look like. Now, traditionally, if you look from the left to the right there, you see the traditional advanced metering. That's normally what we do in a smart grid rollout there, of course. There are many steps along the way that we can do to build upon this, to go to the ultimate there of this ultimate smart grid network there. They include, of course, network instrumentation, IT and OT devices. They include grid operations there, making sure we have stability and reliability in the grid, and of course asset management, all linked around, obviously, data-driven grid management there. Very important. So when you look at it, and when you look at those things and you move forward there, you could come to what we would call the ultimate smart grid situation. What we call cloudification, we call digital twin assets. Digital transformation obviously brings these business values, and I talked about business values before, and we're talking about cybersecurity, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about reliability, and of course the flexibility. And there's one area that we need to look at here is how we move forward, particularly in the flexibility when we have so much DER penetration, so much mix of energies that are coming into the grid there, how we manage that flexibility, how we manage that stability within the grid to our customers, to end users, and with obviously the grid operators. And the grid operators today, I would say traditional DSO is not only a grid operator, but they're also a data operator, okay? So their role is obviously changing there to be more operationally efficient, more customer engagement, increased customer satisfaction, and providing quality and service to the customers, of course. We recently launched what we call grid to prosumer. And this goes across those traditional boundaries, as I said, between behind the meter and front of the meter there. And we've really looked and engaged with many stakeholders there on the three pillars that I would classify there in this in grid to prosumer direction. Obviously, grid optimization, the flexibility services, and the prosumer engagement there. With Schneider Electric, with our partners of AutoGrid and Uplight more recently, launched this engaging across the full customers and the full stakeholders of this life cycle there to really show an end-to-end approach about grid flexibility and maximising this DER penetration and integration going forward. So it's a real evolution here when we're moving forward, particularly the prosumers providing that support into the grid, that bi-directional flow, not one actor in this operation can do it alone. That would be my message. Not one actor could do it alone. Also, Schneider Electric with Microsoft announced grid operations as a service there, lowering ownership costs, deploying microgrids as a service, unlocking the rapid innovation, and innovation is another key word that we'll be talking about in the session there. Innovation moving forward there, deploying agile cloud solutions, developing models to access scalable and flexible architecture, and obviously assisting in platforms and utilities in their digital journey and their transformation to a more reliable, efficient and sustainable grid. I want to touch on a couple of quick success stories here because I'm now running out of time here. Corso there are the key player in the European level there for transmission there, deploying Aviva PI data management systems. Were able to take a Europe-wide snapshot of their load flow every 15 minutes, while every 6 hours are able to produce a 72-hour renewable forecast there. It really gave great visibility into the data aggregation and analytics to support the TSO in their efficiencies and their security moving forward. Another great example with Enel, as you know, Enel, a global leader in energy and expertise, renewables and power, of course, adopted the real-time asset management moving forward with diagnostic tools to prevent failures before they're happening. And we talk a lot about today about predictive and preventative maintenance there, of course. Deploying the system allowed from agile responses, particularly in the COVID period when we had lockdowns happening there. And in this case, over 220 real-time events happened, detected early before these events occurred and these failures, and they were prevented there. And optimised platforms of some 20 gigawatts of power and over 1,200 assets in the power generation side. So it's a really great achievement here. What I want to wrap up and say is that data is and data management and grid data management in particular is a key pillar in decarbonisation, and we'll discuss this in the panel soon there. But not one actor can essentially do it alone. Okay, it needs a community. We need to look at the full life cycle of what we're doing there, from grid to prosumer, we say in Schneider, and providing the technology and the service to partners for grid operators moving forward. So I'll pause and say thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary, for that great introduction. And that title as DSOs, as the conductors of the energy transition, is a good one to keep in mind. Now it's over to you for some questions. We have 2 polling questions, so as before, you can access the Slido app and you type in the code hash #GameChangers. And once you're there, you will come across the first question. Which of the following areas require further EU policy action when it comes to digitalisation of energy? Is it ensuring climate neutrality of ICT? Is it enhancing the uptake of digital technologies in the energy system? Is it empowering individuals to fully participate in the energy transition? Is it developing a European data sharing infrastructure for new energy services? Or do you have your own view on what that should be? So the answers are coming in.
Bang, 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 feel the killer.
And so far, over 40% are viewing that it's point 2, enhancing the uptake of digital technologies in the energy system, with standards and harmonization coming next. I think we're stabilising in now around 35%, enhancing the uptake of digital technologies in the energy transition, and a close second, developing the relevant standards and ensuring harmonisation. Let's go on to the next question. And the next question is, from what sectors can the power sector learn the most when it comes to the integration of digital solutions? Will it be transport and mobility? Is it from financial services, banking and insurance, healthcare, or meteorology, or others? Here there seems to be greater consensus that will allow some more answers to come in. So far we're seeing the majority, over 50%, getting close to 60%, who view its financial services, banking and insurance, with the other sectors quite a way behind. So that's a fairly conclusive result. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite our other panelists on to kick off the discussion. Jose Maria Torres, head of Ormazabal Smart Grid Unit. Welcome. Please join. Thank you, Jose Maria. Then we have Michel Fraisse, Chief Technology Officer from the Digital Power Unit at Huawei. Gary Lawrence, who we already know. Gary, welcome back. Naomi Chevillard, Head of Regulatory Affairs at Solar Power Europe. And Vincent Beruto, Head of Innovation, Research and Digitalization at DG Ener. Welcome to all of you. And just to kick us off, I'd like to start off with a brief introduction from all of you who have not yet spoken, and your reflections on the overall theme on the role of data as the game changer. And Jose Maria, we'll start with you.
Okay, I think that...
I think you need the microphone.
Excuse me, sorry. This morning during the presentation of the 5 game changers, I wrote a very interesting sentence that says that electrical grid is the backbone of the transition. And I would like to remark how important is that, not only for the manufacturers, which is our case, but also for the DNOs and also for the electrical industry as well. So this is my point that I would like to remark after that.
Thank you. Michel.
Very pleased to be here to discuss this topic. Huawei Digital Power. We got digital, we got power. What a surprise. This is the energy business of Huawei. And we are involved into the production of green energy through our solar inverter business, so transforming the solar beam into electricity, both for large solar farms, for rooftop of buildings or residential applications. And then once we have this production of green electricity, then we focus on the efficiency usage of this electricity. In addition to that, I think this is also one big topic, is by 2035, combustion engine vehicles will be forbidden in Europe. And one of the big challenges is the charging infrastructure. So this is also an area where we can help.
Thank you. And Naomi, introduction.
Yes. Well, I think it was very well presented in the presentation. For us, data is a massive opportunity to accelerate the transition. For grids, of course, it's a way to have more observability and controllability of grids, which will help us connect more solar, because grid connection is really the next challenge for our industry. Data was also, of course, very useful in asset management, in installation, etc. But it's already driven by business. But where I think data is really disruptive is for prosumers and consumer solar solutions, where you have really the opportunity to ensure a true energy system integration, which was a buzzword a couple of years ago. So to make the solar system work well together with the EV, with the heat pump, but also to make this prosumer as an active solution provider to the grid.
Thank you. And coming to you, Vincent, I'm going to change the question a little bit, given your role. How do you see the upcoming action plan on digitalization of the energy sector is really going to drive decarbonisation?
Thank you, Lucy. Let me start by thanking Gary for his very good presentation. I liked it very much. I think I agree with him that the digitization is needed to achieve the energy landscape that we need to decarbonize Europe by 2050. And you made the link with all the objectives of the energy policy in Europe. I mean, decarbonization, but also improving the security of energy supply. This is very important, provided we take care of mitigating cyber attacks, the risk of cyber attacks, and finally competitiveness. And I think you being here demonstrate that the digitalization can be good for European competitiveness. It can create growth and jobs in Europe. And in our competitiveness progress report, we showed that the smart grids is a sector which is going to expand significantly in the coming years. And we've got global players in Europe, and that can really make a difference if we foster digitization. And this is why in the European Commission, we are preparing an action plan on the digitization of the energy system, and we envisage 5 main areas of intervention. The first one is the one which was at the bottom of your pyramid, which is how do we facilitate the access and the exchange of data? And that is a very important question. I think that's where the European Union action can make a real difference. Exchange of data between stakeholders, between market actors, but also between appliances, and what can we do at European level to do that? And stakeholders have asked us really to work on it. The second area of intervention is consistent also with the poll that you organize here, is how do we foster investments in digital solutions for the grids, but for the energy system as a whole. And that is something that stakeholders that we've consulted have asked a lot also. So we're working on this, and we're working using all the tools at our disposal, not just regulation, but also the funding programs that we have at European level. And we want not just to support the deployment of digital solutions, we also want to move upstream and see what incentives we can give to develop new solutions in terms of research, innovation, market uptake. And there we've got a number of tools at our disposal. The third area is what you said. It's about consumers, prosumers, to use the word of Gary. I mean, how do we use digital solutions to facilitate the engagement of consumers in the energy transition? I mean, it's very important for us. Consumers at the core of the energy system was the motto of the Green Deal, of the Clean Energy Package even before, so we keep that in mind. And finally, we look at the other side of the coin, and that was mentioned in your poll as well. The fourth area of intervention is cybersecurity. What do we need to do at European level to make our energy system cyber secure with an increasing amount of digital technologies in it? And fifth and last, how do we make the digitization more consistent with our environmental goal? How do we make digital solutions more efficient and more using renewables, and also how do we reuse waste heat in data centers and that kind of things? And that's also an area which is important for us, and where Europe can make also a big difference.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And I'd like to pick up on that last topic about the sustainability of digital solutions themselves and address that to you, Michel. What is the role of the ICT sector, and how can we ensure the sustainability of that sector itself?
Sorry, with the microphone is better. If you need data, okay? So this data need to be treated, and they will be treated in data centers. Today, I mean, there is such an amount of data centers and gigawatt hours of electricity which are consumed by these data centers that you need to make sure that they're running efficiently. You need to make sure that you control the power consumptions. And I think technology can help. Can help in reducing the cooling requirements by trying to favor free cooling when it's possible, but also working on what we call in data centers the power usage effectiveness. Is basically making them more efficient and consuming less electricity, but also water usage effectiveness. And then you can link all this to the CO2 emissions and the decarbonizations. But for this, you need data. You need also to have intelligent data. So then you need to have some smart algorithms. People will say AI, artificial intelligence. So the system itself can react and can control different parameters. So you don't have human beings. So you're going to automate all this. And this is, where we technology can help for the data centers and the ICT to become, greener. Regarding the telecom network, which is also used to carry all this information, same thing. We have been talking a lot about 5G, 4G, and all these new mobiles frequencies. I mean, 5G is 20 times more efficient than 4G. So it's also important to speed up the rollout of 5G in Europe. And then, bring more solar solutions. It can be solar on site when you got, even if it's not 100%, it's still part of the, decarbonizations. It's still part of helping the grid. Then you got plenty of batteries, which will be available on telecom side, on data centers, on vehicles. These batteries are sleeping most of the times. So then we need to implement these smart grid functionalities or smart home functionalities. And again, technology will help to support the grid and have an intelligent usage of this supply.
Thank you, Michel. Then if we move to the broader issue of the electrical network itself, Jose Maria, to you, what do you see as the main challenges in achieving decarbonisation in the grid as a whole?
Thank you. That's a nice question. If we want to meet the European Green Deal goals and also to follow the Fit for 55 package, it's clear that we have to decarbonize the energy, that's for sure. And we need to enable the distributed energy resources that we have in our hands. And I mean, the generated resources that we have in medium and low voltage network, battery storage as well, and the electrical vehicle infrastructure. So how must we prepare the electrical grid to enable those elements? For me, the answer is that we need an electrical grid resilient and flexible, especially flexible. And what do I mean when saying flexibility? I think that the DSO must have the capability to connect or disconnect the different powers, speaking about generation and demand response, the load, available in the system at any time in order to get a balanced system. So, one step forward. We need a complete observability of the network. At this point, I agree with Gary's presentation. It's essential to deploy a massive sensing of the medium voltage and the low voltage network. Without observability, we cannot do anything. And we need automation in order to operate remotely the different elements we have in the network, not only in the medium voltage side, the switchgear, but also in the low voltage. It seems quite obvious, but we are far away from this point. It is not so trivial. The medium voltage networks, let's say, they are investing in automation, but we are far away in the low voltage side.
Okay, thank you. So flexibility, but to enable that we need monitoring and automation. Gary, I see you are keen to...
I just want to continue from there. You know, I think, you know, in the transformation journey, you know, it all starts with a smart bi-directional grid, okay, really enabling that prosumer revolution that I talked about in the presentation there. And you mentioned, you know, the LV network. Honestly, I think that's the next battleground. Okay, I think the visibility we have today from DSO to the LV network is nil or far between, to be frank here. In particular, when we're talking about the full life cycle that we're addressing now and how to move forward there, that's going to be very crucial in moving forward to win this battle together there. And also, I guess, with all the integration and the situational approaches there, we need much more planning awareness, we need much more integration and engagement, as I said. Not one party or one actor can do this alone. We need engagement across all these stakeholders. Sometimes we work in very, I guess, siloed environments, I would say in many cases here. And, you know, when I think about data sharing as well, you know, probably up to no more than 30% of viable data is actually being used, okay, today. So there's a lot of data that we're collecting through whatever algorithms, whatever analytics there that we're not physically using there because we're either not sharing, it's siloed, or we're not adapted to using it there. So this is a great opportunity moving forward.
So the challenge of good data management is the foundation. And Naomi, your view on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what was said. I think digitalization, it's a story of deploying renewables, decarbonizing, and deploying innovations. But that's not on the agenda of grid operators today, not at all. Two bottlenecks that we observe. The first one is remuneration. We're talking about prosumers and integration of renewables to the grid. I mean, this is not today the mission of a grid operator. Of course, it is on their agenda, but in their remuneration schemes do not allow them to deploy the most innovative solution to integrate renewables. Another example, grid planning. We do not have, in a lot of countries, 100% renewable electricity scenarios. But it's very important to work on these scenarios because it's important to understand what will happen on a grid with 60% or more penetration of renewables. So that's, I think, an important point, and I think the action plan will reply to that. Maybe tackling the prosumer aspect. So as I was mentioning, prosumers and demand-side flexibility, it's really a data-driven business model. I think it will also drive a real industry behind. But I think we should start by setting the price signal and giving the right remuneration schemes for those data-driven models, because producing and storing data, it's very costly. By business models, I mean first having proper self-consumption schemes where it's competitive to do self-consumption. We have some provision in the market design, but it's very focused on residential self-consumption, and it doesn't tackle the potential of commercial self-consumption. And it's also flexibility services. And here again, we lack visibility on what will be the remuneration for players to provide flexibility. Once we've established those price signals, we can do a step-by-step regulation of data, interoperability. But again, I think it's also very important to let businesses invent their business models and adapt in a first step. And finally, we also need the infrastructure to accompany all of that, so proper EU cloud infrastructure. Maybe a point that was also raised in our preparatory conversation was also the need to have a good solar inverter industry, because this is in our sector the device that produces a lot of data, but they're very suffering from the semiconductor shortage. So everything linked, big agenda.
Thank you, Naomi. And we will certainly come back to that question of business models, a very important topic as well. But I'd like to open to any questions from our audience. Are there any questions? I don't see any hands, but please do raise it. I see a hand over there. Is there a microphone? Yes.
Many thanks. You can hear me well. Thank you. This is Almudena Diaz from Enel speaking. I want to ask a question mainly to the Commission, to Mr. Berruto here. So in the last months, we have seen the digital policies are advancing, and concretely we have seen one on a European health data space regulation. So this health data space was already considered in the European Data Strategy, which is a document very well written and that clarifies a lot many digital policies impacting the energy sector, and we welcome that. So we could expect also a regulation in the future for the energy data space, we guess. And in the health data space, we have seen that there are several requirements for companies working with the health data of the consumers. So the question is, could we expect also requirements on sharing data for the energy sector as well? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I'm glad you raised the issue of data spaces, because that's indeed one of the actions that we are envisaging in the action plan under the first pillar of activities, which I describe on how to facilitate the access and exchange of data. And the setup of an energy data space seems like a no-brainer. So that's something which we are reflecting on together with other stakeholders. I mean, and I like what Gary said about involving everybody. And for the setup of such a space, you need to consult different stakeholders, businesses, of course, but also consumer organization and NGOs and others who have something to say about it. And we will, of course, learn from the experience of the setup of the health data space. I think there's a lot we can learn from it. It's too early to say how the data space would look like. So I can't answer the second part of your question. That will come in a second stage. This is not something which can happen overnight, but this is definitely something we've been envisaging under the first area of intervention. And that would not be the only data space in Europe. I mean, there will be other ones set up in other sectors. And one thing that we consider important is to link the European energy data space with the other data spaces, because I think there's also scope for synergies between these different data spaces, and that's also opening another set of questions, which I'm not able to answer now, but this is something which will be part also of the reflection.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you for the question. Just diving more deeply into the topic of data, and particularly data access, data governance, I'll direct the question first to you, Jose Maria. How can we ensure, and what advantages do we see in access to data, and how that will contribute to system-wide decarbonisation?
Data access, from my point of view, is a key element in order to manage flexibility. We have seen that it's very important to have a capability to manage the demand response. And the information is key for all the prosumers, as Gary was saying earlier, and also for aggregators and other agents that can act over the electrical grid. So without that kind of information and data access, it's pretty difficult to manage flexibility. And at the same time, I think that data access and regulation of data access is going to be key for the DSOs. The role of the actual DNOs is just operating the electrical network. But from my perspective, I think that they need to integrate all this data, availability of data, coming from the new actors, from the prosumers, battery storage, etc. Without that kind of data flows, it's going to be pretty difficult to achieve the targets.
Okay. Naomi, your reflections on that topic of fair access to data.
Yeah, no, I think I fully agree with you. I think it's the prerequisite, as you mentioned, Jose, to manage the complexity that we'll have in the system in the future. Managing all the, I mean, we'll have a more decentralized energy system. We have the solar rooftop initiative, so we'll need to manage all of that. I think there's an important work done at the moment on understanding who does what and who you address your request more or less to when you want to access data in the Interoperability Implementing Act. It's important to have a similar scheme for not only for data that is at the meter of consumers, but also the sub-meters, because we have more and more data in the inverter of the solar system, in the inverter of a charging station. And here I think one point linked to data access, linked to flexibility, is to really link the work that is being done again on flexibility. For example, flexibility markets. We have an upcoming network code on demand-side flexibility that should define how markets for flexibility used for congestions on distribution grids work. And it's important that when we do this, we also look at what type of data will grid operators need and who needs to access the data when. So again, flexibility needs and data frameworks should go together.
Gary.
Can I say something here? Look, I think that the data sharing ecosystem today includes many players, right? And I think there's many more to come there. And I think we need much more, I guess, mandatory, I use the word almost, in the way we share data and the mechanisms we have in place. And we can all benefit. Take an example, let's say, building to grid, okay, where we have a building operating as a prosumer, okay, producing their electricity, benefiting themselves, but also sharing that data back to the grid, and also obviously supporting the grid operator by managing their load shedding or load flows, etc., etc. So it's one great example of how sharing this data can benefit across this full ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. That question or that point leads me on to the question for you, Michel. How we can ensure consumers' connectivity and also security to really enable those data flows.
I think to get all these data, you're going to go to have more and more sensors and IoTs, which is bringing risk regarding cyber attack. And this is something that we need to tackle very seriously, both on the hardware side, but also on the software side. I think this is also something maybe where the European entities can work on, how to regulate this, all these tests we can do regarding cyber security, because this is a very important topic. Then all this data, then we already got some data protection in place, so, use some European cloud systems would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open it again to the floor. Any other questions? see no other questions coming for now. But please do raise your hand if you... Oh, I see one there.
Charles Lesser. Closer. Charles Lesser, I'm with Apricum. There's so much innovation in data technologies, grid tech at the moment, some of which is represented on the stage, a lot of which is at very grassroots level, an earlier stage. I'd just like, if anyone on the panel wants to answer, whether they think, in terms of trying to drive greater adoption, they think we need more carrot or more stick.
Very good question. Shall we start? Let's start with you, Vincent. More carrot or more stick to drive adoption?
Of the new innovations in the sector, I think the opportunities in terms of programs in Europe, and notably through the Horizon Europe program, that is the program for research and innovation, have considerably increased. And I'm thinking, for instance, of the European Innovation Council, which gives not only grant to innovators to help them move from their concept to something which is a bit more concrete and a prototype, but also towards market uptake and giving them then access to grants and equity so that they can really develop their innovation and have it adopted by the market. I think that is something which has been developed quite a lot. In the Horizon 2020, we supported more than 70 projects addressing smart grids. In Horizon Europe, we had last year and this year several priorities funding available for innovators in the field of digitalization of energy. And we are preparing now the next work program for 23-24, and we want to give innovators even more opportunities to receive grants to develop their innovations. And so that's something which is in the making. We had today a meeting with the representatives from member states to listen to their priorities, and we want to make sure that we listen to them, we take them on board, but we also have priorities that are in line with the action plan that we are designing now.
Okay, thank you. Gary, perhaps you'd like to give your thoughts on that topic, on how we drive the better uptake of innovation.
I would just say it's a yes or no for me. That makes sense, right? You know, I think innovation opens the door and drives many transformations, number one, okay? But on the flip side, I would say we have many of the technologies available today to really help us move forward in this decarbonisation and this transformation there. So the technologies are available today. We're not going to stop innovation, to be clear, and we'll keep on innovating as we go through the transition. It's organic, of course, but they're here today. That's my message.
Vincent, I see you wanted to
just on that,
react on that.
I mean, we consider that for achieving the 2030 goals, I mean, reducing by minus 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, we have the technology that we need. But to achieve the 2050 goal, achieving net zero emissions in Europe, half of the technologies are still at the prototype or demonstration stage. So this is really where we need to speed up innovation.
Thank you. And Michel, your thoughts on that topic of how we speed up and enable better uptake of innovation, and whether we need more carrot or more stick?
I think I agree with both of you guys. I think we have enough innovation and technology today to move forwards towards these goals, but there is still innovation to come, and we are working on this as well. And I think if the European Commission can step up these innovations, it's always good.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on now to look at new business models and the new business models that data opens up. And perhaps, Jose Maria, we start with you. What do you see as the data-driven service models of the future?
That's a good question. I think that the technological innovation regarding digitalization is going to open a lot of doors. Regarding, for example, big data, we have seen that we can explore a lot of services related to that. For example, we are today getting some data from the smart meters, and we are implementing some algorithms in the transformer substation regarding the, let's say, the advanced supervision of the low voltage board, and matching those kind of data, and via algorithms, we are discovering, maybe sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but the outline further where the consumer is connected. If we have technical losses in that line, if we have non-technical losses on that line, we can balancing the low voltage network. So, and this is getting all this information via algorithms and big data. And artificial intelligence is another point also to promote and will help to these new kind of services. We are, for example, looking at some pilots where we are advised giving some steps in predictability of the medium voltage network. Something that is not usual, it's quite usual in high voltage maybe, but thanks to sensing in every point of the medium voltage network, we are able to predict what's going to happen.
Thank you. And Naomi, your reflections on the opportunities and new business models.
Well, I think, as mentioned, I think there are many in the asset management space. For solar, for example, it's very much driven by the business. But yeah, I think, I mean, I liked your question on carrots or sticks. I think for us, I really believe carrots and you know, having visibility on what money you can do out of these new business models will be key. But I don't think we need a lot of subsidies. I mean, the gas prices are going to be quite important carrot already for consumers. But we just have to have the right models to do that. If we don't have the markets to provide flexibility, if you cannot do self-consumption, of course, you cannot develop your solutions and the digital infrastructure that comes with.
Okay, thank you. Well, my digital instructions here are telling me that it's time to wrap up. There are a lot more the topics that we could discuss, but I would like to thank all the panelists and particularly thank you, Gary, for kicking off this session. Such a broad topic, but I think the fundamentals of being really able to access data and enable the prosumers to take a more active role, but also recognize the key role that DSOs have played, the importance of flexibility, the importance of automation, and then data as the foundation of our digital transformation of the power sector, and of course a fundamental step in ensuring that we meet our low carbon goals. So thank you all for taking part, and thank you also for the questions that came from the audience.